make it 11, that's not too bad, so we wanted the mic for the recording, I think. So apologies, I had a few AV problems there, so it looks like I'm stuck on 1024. So I might be slightly cramped when we come on to stuff, but at least it's up on the screen, which is good, better than a couple of minutes ago. So thanks for coming along. So make sure you're in the right room. So this session, what I want to run through is what's new in Visual Studio 2013. My name is Giles Davies. I work for Microsoft in the UK in the Visual Studio team. So it's a small team and we cover all of the Visual Studio tools. And what I want to do is just run through as much as I can really what's new. My main concern about this is timing because there's lots of stuff I want to cover off. So I'm going to try and demo where I can and where is feasible and sensible. I'll show you stuff. In other places I'll use slides and things, but I want to cover off a reasonable range. So the kind of things I want to cover, not in this order necessarily, but there's changes to the IDE, so new stuff there I want to go through. What's new in .NET, some stuff to highlight. What's new for C++ developers. We've got support for Git now, so I want to introduce that and position that. We've got what's new around Team Foundation Server. We've got something new, which is release management. So I'll talk about Visual Studio release management and take you through that, what it does and the process there. What's new for web developers. Very briefly cover off some of what's new for app developers. We've got something brand new called Application Insights, which is in preview. So I'll cover that as far as I can. And Visual Studio Online. So as much as anything else with Visual Studio Online, probably to debunk the name. Exactly what it is and isn't. So I'll cover that off, but we'll go through that. So broadly speaking, that's what I want to cover in this session. So I'll take my watch off and try and keep an eye on the time. So where I wanted to start was probably just with the bit that everyone's going to be using. Of those topics, I'm sure there are people that in the room you'll be using some of those technologies or languages and not others. But the common factor typically is the IDE. So I just wanted to run through a few bits and bobs that have changed there. So I'm going to start there. So let's start off with taking a look at some stuff. So let's have a look at Visual Studio. So there's a few things I want to run through here, and I just want to take some time to highlight some of the changes. So where I want to start, and apologies if this gets a bit cramped, apologies just for the screen resolution. But where I want to start probably is let's start with some little stuff up in the top hand corner here. So let's start with feedback, this little guy. So just be aware of that. If you click on that, you can send a smile, send a frown, all that kind of thing. So the product group is genuinely keen that you provide some feedback. So if you want to send a smile, put in some details, include a screenshot, all that kind of stuff. So they genuinely want to get feedback, good or bad. So be aware that it's there, because that can be a little bit hidden away. And you can also go to the forums and report a bug and that kind of stuff. So just be aware of that little guy sitting up there. The other thing that's quite a sort of big conceptual change, I guess, is the concept of a connected IDE. So what I've done here is I've signed in. You'll see if you haven't signed in, it just says sign in. You don't need to sign in, but you can sign in with a Microsoft account. So in my case, my Hotmail address. And that then conveys a few benefits around things like synchronization of settings that I'll come on to in a minute. When you're in there, you've then you can see basically sort of who you are and what you're connected to. So in this case, there's my Visual Studio Online account, and we'll talk about that later, so we can see that one. I can see what project I'm working in, who I'm connected as, and I can go and have a look at things like account settings. And if I click on the picture, you see similar sort of thing. It's just picking up my profile settings. So there's some information in there. So I mentioned sort of partly why you do that. Well, that allows us to flow your settings between instances of Visual Studio. So I guess the classic situation there is that you've got more than one setup, maybe at work or at home or multiple machines in one place. And what you want to do is to have it configured in the same way. So colours, settings, line numbers on, whatever. All that kind of stuff to be the same in whichever machine you go to. So how does that work? Well, I'm going to get there by way of something that isn't new, but I think it tends to be generally overlooked, and I think it's quite a useful tool. So I want to talk about this quick launch, Quick launch isn't new, so apologies for that, but as I say, it was introduced earlier, but it's not always that well used or noticed. So Control Q takes you in there, just click on it otherwise. And basically that allows you to search for things. So if I start to type in synchronize, then that's going to pick up any options or settings or commands inside the IDE that are relevant to whatever I'm typing. So if I then select that, that will take me into the relevant part of the tool options dialog in this case, and that's showing me where those synchronization settings are. So you may well have found them. I'll come back to search in here as well. But while we're here, what is it that synchronizing Visual Studio by signing in allows you to do? Well, first of all, note that you can disable synchronization. So if you do not want to have your settings flow between instances, just turn that off, so you don't have to have it. And then, as you can see, you've got appearance, so themes. So I like the dark theme. If you want to, when you go onto another machine, that be reflected, it'll be picked up and so on. Fonts, colours, all that kind of thing. Aliases, shortcuts, what you see at startup, and settings around text editor. So, as I say, the line numbers, the enhanced scroll bar, which I'll talk about, and so on. So, all that kind of stuff can flow with you, but you can pick and choose which bits do. So I think just a nice way of doing that. Just to finish off the quick launch as well, a few things to be aware of. Let's say if I put something else in, so let's say I put in debug, what we'll see there is it's bringing up pretty much everything that's relevant to whatever I typed. Now, at the top are menu options, so these are commands. So if I click on those, that thing will get invoked. So you can actually activate it from there. It's not just telling you, oh, you can find this in this menu. But you can invoke it from there. We can see what's in the options dialog and other things as well. And you can narrow these down. So if you type in @ you'll see there are some shortcuts, and then you can specify what you're looking for. So if I say opt debug, then I'm just narrowing that list down to all of the things that match my search string that are in the tools options dialog. So I say this bit's a bit of a cheat, it's not new, but I just think it's a useful thing to be aware of. And you can find some good stuff in there. So if we go back to let's go back to our synchronization settings. The really big stuff, there should be a drum roll for this, I think. The really major stuff that's changed here is you can resize the tools options dialog box. So full steam ahead on that. Unfortunately, my screen's so small that I can hardly increase the size. Strangely, there isn't actually a sort of maximise button. I think you can resize it, but there we go, big change. And then also you can search. So I clicked in it, or Control-E generally will take you to the search aspect of a screen. And then I can, let's do the same. Let's go and look for some debug options. I can find that stuff in here. Or things like maybe code lens that I'll talk about later. So we can start to search within tools options and find that stuff. So some sensible, very small, but usability changes there as well that we can talk about in that. So let's talk a little bit about themes as well. Let's come in here. So there are now some standard themes, dark, light, and you can also get a blue theme as well. For those of you who like to go back to the good old days of coloured themes. So there was a lot, it's worth saying actually that during something like the 2012 launch effectively, and the run-up to that, we did get a lot of feedback about colours and themes, and that was listened to. At one point it was, I don't know if you saw it, but the pieces were incredibly flat and grey in terms of colouring, so the UX teams did listen to that. So hence they put a lot of effort into themes. I won't go into it, but there's also a lot of support for if you've got high resolution screens. They've done a lot of work around actually the icon colorings and fonts and all the rest of it, so that Visual Studio looks better on a better resolution screen as well. So just be aware of that as well that's sitting under there. Some other small stuff worth just covering off. If I fire up another instance of Visual Studio, so if you've got two Visual Studio instances, you'll see that there's just a small thing here. Just make more sense probably if you've got multiple screens, but there's a difference in the icon in the active window is coloured differently. It depends on the theme actually, but you'll see that difference then as you switch between them. You can see those, so just be aware of that as well. So this guy for the moment. Just some little bits around that. Now, some other stuff that's worth talking about. Again, just quickly recapping some 2012 stuff probably, but if I go in, let's go to files and unaware, things like Control F, we've just got the dialog that appears, but I can now start searching. So if I'm looking for, I don't know, as I type a string in, we're seeing that highlighted inside the text inside the editor. And again, from 2012 really and earlier, you can also dive deeper into the elements within the Solution Explorer. So there's a lot more information you can get just within the Solution Explorer. There's quite a few things up here to be aware of. So you can filter down your files. So there are some here, for example, if you're using Team Foundation Server, you can filter down to just show the files that have pending changes, for example. So there's some little icons buried away. It's just worth spending 30 seconds getting used to what some of these are, but they can be quite useful. So a few things just in the editor itself. We've got things like brace completion. So if I come in and say, well, actually, let's have a method. As I start to type these in, the braces are completed for me. Put in the curly braces, that gets completed for me as well. And if I'm going to do, that makes sense here, but something in here, let's do it again. We get the braces and the string quotes completed for me. So there's a lot more sort of predictive completion as I start to type stuff through in there. You can also, if I'm on a line and I hold down the Alt key, and then I use the arrow keys, I can move that line around, up and down in there. In this case, obviously that wouldn't be perhaps that useful, but if I select multiple lines and hold down the Alt key, then I can move that around as well. So I can move, I can start playing around with where I think that method should sit physically in the file, and that kind of thing. So I think a useful shortcut to just help you move stuff around. The navigation method, so Control, comma. So if I want to find something, so there's my A method. Couple of differences here. First of all, it's non-modal, so the navigate to before was modal, so you'd find something that you couldn't then click on the underlying files. So that's not modal anymore. Secondly, at the moment I've just typed AM, so I'm getting back to my A method that's sitting inside the file. If it's picking up a match somewhere else, so it's presumably matching on the AM example there, as I select that in here, this could be a resolution issue. Let's get rid of this by a second. Just get back in, sorry. And come back here. Right. So as I come into these guys, it's being opened up in the preview tab. So the preview tab's not new. But what it's doing is, as I take a look at some of these, if it's not the file that I've got open, then rather than opening up a new file and putting it into the document it's just reusing the preview tab. So just a nicer way of exploring that. I'm going to have a look at it. So I'm in some of these other files, wherever they happen to be. Oops, not that one, so we're back in the same one. If I'm somewhere, so at the moment this is in account model, and I may decide to come out of that. If I just hit escape, then it takes me back to my original file and all the line I was on. So I think it's just a smoother way of navigating around. Where is this? Let's try and navigate. Didn't want to escape, and you're back to where you were. So it's less of the closing down tabs and trying to work out where you came from and all that kind of stuff. In a similar area, similar vein, is going to definitions as well. So if I go and pick something, doesn't really matter what, let's say here or something, you'll I'm sure be familiar with F12. If I just go in and say go to definition, but we've now got peak definition, so Alt F12 or off the menus. So if I just do Alt F12, what that does is it opens up the definition inside the file. So it's not changing your codes. If I had line numbers on, you'd see that the line numbers continue around the peak definition. And that means that I can start to have a look at what is all this referring to. I can I can start diving through this. Maybe I'm interested in this guy, and I can continue that process inside here. So if I carry on, let's go find something else. So I'm interested in, we'll jump out now, something like that. I can keep diving into stuff, and I'm doing that within my peak definition window. What you may notice as well is that there's actually a breadcrumb trail here. So not only am I jumping between those files, but I can navigate between those inside the peak definition. So I can stay within the original file, and then I can navigate around trying to understand where am I going, where have I come from. There are shortcuts for that, so Controls minus and plus. So if you don't want to use the mouse, you can navigate between those. When you're done with that, a couple of things. You may have found something interesting. You can promote that to the document well. So actually, you can just say, I prefer to open this up now. I am in a useful place. If you hit escape, or just close it, it just goes away. And the other thing to be aware of is that this is editable as well. So I can come in here and whatever equals 3, do something in here. I can stick this stuff in, so I can edit it in place there as well. And then when I'm done, I can close that down and bring that in there. So I think that's pretty useful. Certainly, my typical anti-pattern, I guess, would be generally don't know what I'm looking at anyway. So I look at it, sprawl around files, with certainly a combination of the preview tab. Before that was around, and then have loads of files open, and then spend some time tidying it up. So I just got back to whatever it was I was interested in. So I think a combination for me of preview tab and peak definition means that I'm not littering my editor space with files basically. So for me that works.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Maintainability 91 nag, is that just an ultimate?
Yeah, actually, it's excellently asked questions. I was going to come on to that. So good timing. Check will be in place. All right. Let me come clean and get that one out of the way first of all. So I want to move on smoothly to code lens, which you've seen starting to peek out here. So let me just highlight that. Oops, let's go in here, and I'll show you a couple of different versions of that. So we're starting to get some information about your code bubbled up basically inside there. It is an ultimate feature. I'm happy to take feedback on that. I don't set the decisions around these. It wouldn't be the first time someone would have asked me why is that an ultimate, that's just the way the tools are divided up from a marketing point of view. But let me show you what it is, you can see it's there. I don't know what the feature holds for that in terms of where it will sit, either if that's a follow-on question. But I'll genuinely happy to feedback sentiment. To those that may. So what we're looking at is that I think the concept behind this is kind of like a head-up display in a car or a plane or something. It's the idea that rather than having to take your eyes off what you're doing, in this case working in a method, for example, is that I'm getting some contextual information that's put in front of me. So it's information that already exists. It's just that you have to go off and get it. And that's what the code is called, code lens, or code lens indicators. And it consists of multiple code lenses, and you'll see the range of code lenses increase over time. So what we're looking at here is in this particular project, and because I just have to reboot my machine and do things, it's not quite where it should be. So let me do something while we're talking. So let me go in and run all of my unit tests. I won't get any on that. Let's see if this guy there, you can see it happening. So this is telling me that, I don't know if you just saw it, but that code lens came in, it got added in as I started to run my unit tests. And it's telling me that two things already here. Well, there's a few things that this code lens is telling me. First of all, there are 22 references to this method inside this solution. Secondly, that there are 19 unit tests that reference this bit of code, and at the moment they're still running, so none. We don't know how many are passing or failing, but we should know that shortly. And then the third one we can see here is the maintainability index, so that's the code metrics that Visual Studio provides, which is munging together things like the cyclomatic complexity, the number of lines of code, various other things, and puts it together into there is an algorithm, puts it into a maintainability index. So that in itself, none of these pieces of data are new, but it's how they're bubbled up and shown to you. So you can get to that. What that helps with, for example, there is that I know that I know how relatively maintainable this piece of code is. And for me, I think there's a fairly close relationship between complicated as opposed to complex code, but complicated code. If it's sufficiently complicated that you can't understand all the paths through it, it's very likely there are bugs in there, because if you can't follow it, you probably haven't been able to test it. And so that would indicate to me a good place to, it's worthy of putting effort in to refactor and unit test and all that kind of stuff. So, while I was talking, there we go, it's gone from 19 to 19 and 19 passing. So there's stuff in there. When you click on these, it's not just a bit of sort of dumb data. If I go in there, we can then see what is referencing it. And we could move to those. I can bring these up on the code map. That's another ultimate feature. But if I show this on a code map, let me just come back out. That will start to build up the relationships visually for me, so I can understand what is it talking to me. I can do all sorts of stuff with this. I can show related types and filter it down and drag new stuff on and all sorts of other stuff. I won't get into that in great detail here. It's not new, actually, particularly for 2013, but it allows me to visualise what that's telling me. So I don't want that for the moment. If I go into the unit test, then I can see all of these unit tests. I can see their duration. And I can choose to run all of those or not. Where I would see this as particularly useful, I think, is if this came up and said that 18 of my 19 had passed and one had failed. I'll see the failed one will go to the top of this list. That might be a problem in the code or the unit test or whatever. I can fix that, and then in this list I can just select one. So I can do that past one as well. It would be very effective at the moment. I can just choose one and rerun that here. So for me, that would allow you to go through a very quick cycle of actually, I think I fixed it, just check the broken one. That seems to have worked now. I'll rerun all of my whole battery of unit tests and see if they've worked. So to give you that sort of feedback. If we look at the maintainability one there, then this is explaining sort of how it got to that point. So again, it's just building on the code metrics. And if we go back to our quick launch, and if I go into code lens, these are the code lenses that are available basically. So you can select which of those that you see. Now some of those depend on Team Foundation Server. So the project that we're looking at there, none of those code lenses rely on Team Foundation Server. It is actually in Visual Studio Online, the project, but it's not relying on those. But some of those will, so things like bugs, work items, code reviews, that kind of thing. So if I just switch to, which I hopefully started up in the background, if I just switch to this virtual machine, which has got a full on-premise TFS server running, here's a different project. Oops, sorry, let me. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to look at this just before we started. Let me just change the resolution slightly. That's going to get difficult. Let's go up, down. It's a little bit too high, isn't it? There we go. Let's desync it. Right, go back in here. So, give it a bit more room. So here we are back at code lens. In this case, I'll just zoom in a bit. What we're seeing is similar things, so references, unit tests. What is different here is that because this is hooked into Team Foundation Server, is we can also see, well, who made what changes last. And if I don't on this virtual machine, if I had link installed, we'd also have all the link capabilities, so I can see precedence. So I can look at this. I look at this in a very positive way. There's probably another angle you can take on this, but you can look at the code and say, well, who was the last person who did that? Are they online? I want to chat to them, email them, have an audio conversation, whatever. We can talk about how it got to that point. I can see where we are in terms of versioning. We've got sort of a similar view that shows you the changes and the change sets that are related to this. You can dive into each of these, look at change set details, you can see what's going on. I can see this particular method was part of a change set, therefore it's associated with a particular work item, and I can see the relationships with that, and I can go ahead and open it and have a look at that, so I can see what was the requirement or bug or all that kind of information. There's also a code review related to this, so there was a code review request that was sent out. So we can just keep adding this stuff in. I think we'll see more and more of these over time. As I say, the way I look at this is, all of this information is available. It's just trying to make it available to you up front, rather than digging around and going and saying, it would be really useful to know who last worked on this method, and are they online, and what was the difference, and are there any bugs associated with it, and all that kind of stuff.
Is that auto-stored per method, or will that, I suppose, depends on the version control system?
It does, yeah. So at the moment, actually, it's Team Foundation server on premise only. It's very efficient. So one of the goals of the team behind this was this should have no impact on you. You should see no performance impact. It's very efficiently done. It's sort of cached. What you'll see is, so for example, I added in the work item review association last night to this one. It just took, I didn't time it, but it was sort of 30 seconds or so before it appeared back. So it just sort of keeps an eye on it, refreshes its caches, and it does that. But yeah, it's TFS only at the moment, but we may see that change.
The testing metrics, can they integrate with any unit or other testing framework?
Yeah, so because, so this is really as a result of the changes that happened in 2012, because we've opened up our test framework. The test explorer and the information that gets from that will work with any of the test frameworks that are supported. So yeah, it doesn't matter if those are, and in fact, if I go back to, if I don't confuse myself with which one I'm looking at, if I go back to this one, and we have a look in here, the unit of these 19, well, I don't know specifically those, but in this solution of these unit tests, I've got a mixture of N unit, X unit, and an S test actually. And that's all just hoovered up. It doesn't care by that point. It just knows I've got these metrics about the unit test, as long as it's a supported unit test framework.
Sorry, is that replacing annotation? Is annotation still there?
No, annotation's still there, so that's entirely separate, yeah, absolutely. So it's not replacing that. And in fact, code length doesn't replace anything at all anyway. It's just bubbling up information that is otherwise available, but perhaps not just in front of your face. That's all I'm saying. Right, so that's one last thing on that, just last thing on code lens, is if I select these guys, I'll show you shortcuts, but I don't have a problem with that. So here's your alt to get some numbers up. You can get to these with the keyboard as well. So, first part. I think I'm behind, but we'll carry on. So talked about ID. So let's spend a little time just talking. I'm just going to demo these bits and talk about it. So .NET 4.5.1. A few things to talk about. I'm going to talk about the first three there in a little bit more detail in a minute. So I'll come back to those. So let's start with Entity Framework ADO.NET Connection Resiliency. That's basically, all you need to do is install .NET 4.5.1. You don't need to do anything, you don't need to reconfigure or recode. And if you're talking to Azure databases or data source, then that will add in automatic retry connections. So if you've lost your network connection or something like that, it will try and re-establish that for you. There are properties you can set about how many times to try and how long to time out and stuff like that. But basically, you get a great deal of resiliency out of the box. So that's what that one's about. ASP.NET Application Suspension is about much more efficient use of memory. So when a ASP.NET application is not being used, it gets sort of dehydrated and rehydrated much more effectively, making better use of the resources on that machine. Again, that's something you don't need to do anything. You just need to use the new version of .NET. Multi-core JIT improvements is about if you've got multi-cores, which I'm sure you will on your machine. I'm not sure it's even possible these days not to. If you've got multi-core on your machine, then the JIT compiler will make much better use of them. So you get better performance out of that. So therefore better performance generally. So things like startup and so on. This is one of those I've seen it described as with great power comes great responsibility ones. A much asked for request was the ability to be able to, on demand, compact your object heap. So basically, you do request your own garbage collection. So that capability is there now, so you can add that into your code. It does come with that caveat that generally speaking, .NET is well optimized. But if you think you've got a reason that you need to go and prod it and tell it to do things, then you've now got that. So that capability is there. Not too worried about that one. .NET framework update cadence. I guess the key thing around this area is NuGet. So increasing use of NuGet. And what that means is that the .NET team effectively they're already doing it, are putting out updates and new stuff for .NET via NuGet. So you can pick it up inside Visual Studio without waiting for a new formal release. So that will come out through NuGet to get new capabilities. Now part of that, so you get these NuGet releases, part of that is, there seems to be the terminology du jour, that's it everywhere at the moment, but is curated NuGet.NET framework area. So basically there's when you go into NuGet, you'll see there's a Microsoft site, and that's where we put curated, i.e. approved, considered updates to it. And you can deselect it, and you can get new stuff from that. So be aware of that. A couple of things I want to go into a bit more. Apparently number 9 all-time requested feature was to have edit and continue for 64-bit applications. So that's done. So I guess that's all I need to say, but there it is. So in other words, the problem was on 32-bit applications, I think since 2005, you've been able to, during debug, make changes to the code and then continue picking up the changes to the code. And that didn't work on 64-bit. So that's been addressed basically. And that's across a range of technologies. And it's there. So a lot of people ask for it. So it's there. Hopefully that's good. Another one is method return value inspection. So in other words, so this is something that's been available in other languages, but now natively, not in .NET. So now, again, when you're debugging, this means that you don't have to add in maybe a sort of almost a dummy variable to understand what the end result of a method is. You can just have a look at it. You don't need to add anything in. So in this case, hopefully you can see it. If you're basically on the last brace of the method, then you'll see in the autos the return value that's going to come back from that. Or in the immediate window, you can put in $return value that will show you that. So just mean, you don't have to have that. I wonder what that's going to return, kind of thing. A break.
Is that visible in the locals window or just?
Just in those, I think, actually. Yeah. And then asynchronous debugging improvements. So the change here really is that prior to 2012, and this could come about too much before then, but 2012, the debugger didn't really know how to cope with asynchronous code very well, so it was quite hard to understand what was in there. It effectively sort of makes it look a bit like it's non-async, so serial code. So you get just a better understanding of what you're looking at. It's slightly easier to understand mentally what you're looking at in the debug window. So that's there, and that's available in things like the call stack and the task window. So very important, particularly if you're looking at kind of any of the new stuff, Windows Store apps and so on. You're pretty much going to be doing async work anyway. So a lot of the new stuff requires that. So increasingly important. So let's quickly talk about some C++ stuff. Again, there's a couple here I'll call out in a bit more detail in a minute. So I won't go through them all. Key one in the middle really is there are some specific performance improvements. So there's been some work on that. And then there are also compatibility and version conformance. So there is, I think it's probably true to say that C++ support has lagged behind relative to the managed languages. And I think we're aware of that, and there is a conscious effort to try and improve that situation. So I don't think this isn't the end of it, but there's been a sort of real effort to say, let's try and improve where we can. And obviously there are differences between languages and how you do things, but let's try and add back in a level of support that's kind of expected elsewhere. Also some work on things like C standards as well, so not just C++, but C as well. And then if I look at some of the specific ones maybe worth calling out, most of the stuff I showed you earlier is also true now within C++ projects as well. So things like brace completion, we'll actually put semicolon at the end. A lot of completion for you, just to make it an equivalent experience. So those kind of capabilities. You've also got code formatting options. White space, lines, all that kind of stuff. So as you type stuff in, so if you put 1+1, if you have the default code formatting, it'll space that out for you. So you get a space between the numbers and the operator and all that kind of stuff. So again, use your the quick launch to have a look at it. In tools options, you'll see under C++ there's a whole series of formatting headings. I think this is probably a good example of where use that feedback as well. I think the way I've seen this is definitely product teams putting what they think is probably a good default. But they're really happy to have suggestions on that if you think you have a better default or they'd like to get views on that. So if you think what they put in there is not right out of the box, then say, but obviously you can change that individually as well. The other thing is just line code debugging. Classic problem here is I'm trying to debug it, but actually I'm wading through third-party or other libraries. So what you want to do is just filter it down to the code that I write and I care about, and that's really what the code debugging is. And that's something that's available in other languages. It's been extended out actually into things like JavaScript as well and other areas, but that's also there for C++. So be aware of that. And just remind me actually, because I forgot to show you one thing, which is also true for C++, which is why it's just something to remember to talk about it, is the enhanced scroll bar. So it doesn't matter on the language here, but the pattern thing here is that features that are in Power Tools, at each release the team looks at what were the top things in the Power Tools and should we take those into the product. And the top feature apparently for the Power Tools was the enhanced scroll bar. So if you go into this, the bar mode here is the standard scroll bar. What's been added in, you may be familiar with this from Power Tools, is the map mode. So if I select map mode, you can select whether or not to have a preview of the code and how narrow or wide your scroll bar is going to be. So if I stick to medium, turn that on, and then what we're getting here is I've got my preview, which is in the form of a tooltip that I can see as I go up and down the code. I can see the kind of outline of the code, and then I can see the coloured bars are representative of what's going on, where I've got changes. If I go down to, let's go somewhere, let's go break that kind of thing and move back up. And in fact, let's just go down here and put in higher up. So what I can see there, so I just do that so you can see a few things. If I just zoom in, what I can see there is the yellow shows me that that's where I've made some changes. The bright red is showing me that I've got a compile, I've got a problem. So that's where I took the semicolon off. The bar is actually showing me where the caret is in the code, and the darker red, you can hopefully just about see in there, is where I've got breakpoints. So there's quite a lot of information that you can glean from it if that's useful. I think it's quite useful. I think even with the preview that's great as well. I think you can almost understand where you are in code from the shape of it sometimes. I know we've got the big method, the little one, and that's where I want to jump to kind of thing. So I think it's just quite useful, but entirely up to you. And again, just the easiest way probably is right click, go to scroll bar options, and choose whatever option you want to go with on that. No, sorry, no, I confused that. I meant to show it earlier, and then say that it's also available in C++, but basically it's available pretty much everywhere. So it's not specific to C++, that's .NET plus C++.
Things like the little tooltip's been fed back into the Power Tools, but people were too cheap to have Visual Studio 2013 yet.
Good question. I don't know. I'll ask it in those words. No, I don't know. Actually, I have to check. Don't know. Good question, actually. Yeah. My assumption would be there'll be no need for it in power tools, but it would come out. You're right if there's a functional difference or not. So yeah, not sure. Actually. But equally, I guess looking forward as well, whatever the next top things are in the power tools, hopefully they'll come down into future versions of the tools as well. So let's move on quickly on to some sort of what's new for web developers. I'll go through these, maybe show you a couple of these quickly as well. So first one is this concept of one ASP.NET. So the basic thing here, I guess, is that I guess this will depend on you, the project, skills, etc. But there's, I think the view that sort of MVC is the right way, the way forward. And then, but for various reasons, people still need to use web forms, even if they're a little bit ashamed of that kind of thing, and all the rest of it. And I think that was seen as kind of not quite the right message. So the view of this is actually that rather than, which is what you have to do before, make an upfront decision, and you can do it manually, but essentially you're saying, I am entirely going to be MVC, or I am entirely going to be web forms, or whatever, is except that you might need some blend of those. So it's one ASP.NET, so you go in and choose that, and I'll show you that quickly in a minute. So it looks, there's one option, basically, I want an ASP.NET web application, and then you choose which bits you want within that. So I'll show you that briefly in a second. Security has been changed, I'll show you that, but it's just easier to choose your security model. So I'll show you that very briefly in a minute, so let's not linger on that one. And then browser link, which I'll also show you, which I think is really interesting. So this links you from your IDE out into browsers and back again, potentially as well. So I'll show you that, and I think that's quite interesting. So did I say anything else there? Right, so let's have a little look at that. So if I come in, let's go back to this guy. Let's create a new project. So the first thing is if I go to, there we go, and that handy, it's on the right one. If I go to the project templates, you'll notice, and I know I've heard some people say actually when they see that they think something's gone wrong, that it hasn't installed properly or whatever. But so there's just this one ASP.NET web application. In contrast, there are the Visual Studio 2012 old templates. So rather than coming in and saying, yes, I want an MVC app, what you're doing is saying, I want an ASP.NET web application. Go into this, no, not worry about those changes. And then this is where you can do that kind of mix and match. And so actually, maybe I'm going to be fundamentally MVC, but I do want a bit of web forms, and I want some unit tests or whatever it happens to be. I want a single page application, but I also want some web forms. But whatever mix makes sense for you. And under change authentication, that's where you can choose, I want no authentication. Do I want to use individual user accounts like Microsoft accounts or Google, Facebook, all that kind of stuff, organisational accounts, and if so, how am I going to set it up, what kind of access level, or we're just going to use Windows authentication. So you can start to decide on that at this level. So if I just create a bog standard one out from here, a couple of things when it starts up, well I'll talk about it while it's just doing its thing, is we've also changed it to use Bootstrap as well. So Bootstrap, which has come out from Twitter, is kind of de facto standard around how to create your, or how to templatize effectively your web applications. So a couple of small changes here. First of all, this is the standard ASP.NET MVC application, but what we're not looking at is the home page for that application. What we're looking at is a README file that is telling you more about Bootstrap, really, and interesting stuff on how to work with this or how to deploy it. So there's some useful links in here. That, when we run it, we won't see that. So it's actually just, that's this README that's sitting down here. If we just, let's just run it up first of all, and then we'll see the, I'm sure, familiar MVC app, although this time with the Bootstrap theme. So that's sitting in there. So good thing about that is that does, it allows, there's all sorts of stuff available to go and look at how to customize it, how to get additional themes, all sorts of things, because it's a sort of de facto standard, if you like. So there's a lot available on the web. What it also means is it gives you capabilities for resizing out of the box. So you notice there I've got many options effectively at the top. If I start to resize this, That's shrunk down into, I'm sure you're probably familiar with that, those little bars that appear, particularly on if you're browsing on the mobile or something, and then I can get to those. So I haven't had to do anything. You're just getting the benefits of the framework like Bootstrap for you, and that's in there. So you get those benefits, which is great, and also takes away a little bit of the, I wonder what it's going to look like under whatever resolution, how's it going to reconfigure. We can do some of that for you. So what I'll show you is a bit of the browser link actually. So what I'm going to do here is come in and say browse with. I've heard that people use occasionally things other than Internet Explorer. If that's the case, and I guess it's edge cases, then you can select whatever the combination of browsers you've got installed, essentially, on your machine. So I've got Firefox and Chrome alongside IE, and I'm just going to say browse. Now I'm really going to push the space now. So what that's done is it's opened up that. So it's run it, but it's using System R library to basically open up and push that out into the selected browsers. So one simple advantage here is that means that I can make changes and I can refresh those changes back out. So I can see what it looks like in each browser. If I go back in here, let's go and do something. Let's go to in here somewhere and say let's change that to DevWeek 2014, something like that. Make that change, and what I'm going to do here is say refresh linked browsers. So if I do that, and again, also apologies, I can't do it side by side. There's a space. If I go back to my browsers, that's pushed out that change. That's a simple change, but whatever change I want to do, I can then see that propagated out to whatever browsers I'm connected to. So I can just keep doing that. I don't need to stop and rerun and all that kind of thing, which is nice. Which is a nice thing to do. We can also do, I recommend having a look at it, is one of Visual Studio extensions is Web Essentials. And Web Essentials does all sorts of stuff, and stuff I'm not going to get into, like Zen coding and all sorts of things that really can speed up a lot of this development. In this context, one of the things it gives you is down the bottom, in each of these browsers, it's adding in effectively the bi-directional pushback from the browsers back into the IDE. So if I go and say, let me resize first, that's not going to work at all. Let me just try and clear some space here. If I go in and say, let's do it again. Okay, that's going to be challenging. I'll do. So if I go in here and say inspect, you notice as I hover over things, it's taking me, sorry, I just can't move around very much in this space, but it's taking me to that part of the underlying code. So it's opening up in the preview tab actually, but it's opening up that bit. So for me, I always struggle with exactly where is that. So I would like to change it, but where is it buried inside the site? So again, that's pretty good. I like that. And what you can also do is actually design it as well. So let's come back in here, come back to this title, and say, hello, DevWeek, and that's making that change back into the code as well. So I can make changes at that level. That's true also for CSS. So I can make that as using System R, pushing it back into Visual Studio. If I came back in here, so at the moment that's not reflected in the other browsers. So again, you wouldn't have to have all the browsers open all the time, it's not part of the process, but if I wanted to, I could then come in and say refresh those, and then that's pushed out. So I've gone from IE back to Visual Studio back out to all of those guys to keep them in sync, so you can see how does it look in these other browsers. So that's kind of the that's browser link with Web Essentials building on top of that, basically to help you achieve that. And then the last thing to very quickly show you in this area is if I go to Startup. Configure auth, sorry, in here. I've set if you noticed, when I created this ASP.NET application, I left it on the default actually in the end, which is the individual authentication. And what it does, it just, in here, you've just got some lines that you uncomment as appropriate and fill in things like your IDs and secret keys or whatever the appropriate is for whatever that is. Just because I don't have to type that in, I'll take the lazy route and let's change this guy. So if I, what I work on here? Let's have a look. Let's expand this guy out. So if I go in and log in, okay, sorry, I haven't tried that out with browser link before. There we go. It's in a bit of code. So if I rerun that, just in IE for the moment, if I go in and log in, what we should see, oh, there it is down the bottom, sorry, they won't be there. I missed it, sorry, it's my screen size again. That's added in the Google authentication. It will be the same for the others, mine could be large, fit in the relevant app IDs. I go in there and it takes me to whatever the login is. So that ability to use that authentication, fairly simple actually, build that into your application. So let's crack on a bit. Next area, app development then. So a few things, let's talk through these and cover these off a bit. So lots of changes around the different stages of developing Windows apps basically. So improved designer, so you can be more precise about your layout. That's a sort of key area. Better support for sample data, so you need sample data at design time, so that you can see how your application will look with data, particularly in sort of design views, otherwise it can be blank potentially, so to have a look at that. And help, extra timelines and things around CSS animations. Extra templates, so things like a hub project template for apps. So to really emulate some of the apps that you'll see in the Windows Store, for example, which will typically have that sort of very nice large picture and scrolling off horizontally to find relevant information. So there's a project template to help you create that. And to be able to use things like Azure Mobile Services to help with really sort of pushing data around and using the cloud to help connect your applications, your apps that are there. Excuse me. Other interesting areas around testing. Visual Studio Premium, when we're on editions, Visual Studio Premium adds in coded UI, which is automated functional testing for either web or desktop clients. That is now available for store apps as well. So that means that you can have regression tests that go and look at values, and you basically drop a target icon over your app, and you can select elements on your app and then put in assertions against those. So in other words, I will consider this passed if this value is that on the screen and if the value of this element is or is not equal to this and that kind of thing. So it allows you to build up automated tests that are verified automatically as well. So you can have some level of regression testing. And there's a performance and diagnostic hub, which does some interesting stuff. I'll maybe show you that very quickly. I just don't know there's time, so I may do that. Bundled in with that is some really interesting stuff around, well, how's the UI being used, and what impact would this have on things like the energy consumption. So if you're developing apps, and they're going to be run typically on something like a tablet, then how significant a drain is it going to have on the tablet, and therefore is it going to have a limit on the usefulness of that device, depending on the situation you're looking at. So some extra tools to help with that. So let's take maybe a very quick look just at that. So if I come back in here, let's go and create a new Windows Store app. I'll show you that. I'll use the existing sort of dummy one I've got. So there's the Hub app project template. What I'll do actually, let's go in and open up this one. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is if I go into the Analyze menus and Performance and Diagnostics, we've got some options here. Just get rid of these. Around what I want to look at is the UI responsiveness, energy consumption, that kind of thing. So if I start this app with a view to sample UI responsiveness, yeah, let's run that. Sorry, you can see I'm not a great designer. So in this case, I'm going to select some photos of hills where I live in this case. Let's just select a few, doesn't matter. So I'm just using a file picker to pick those up. And then that's just going to run through and show me vaguely the same picture, etc., etc. So I'm running this, and I want to understand what's going on in terms of the UI responsiveness. What I'm going to do here is let's just close that down, come back in here, I can force it to stop as well. And then rather like any of the sort of performance tools in Visual Studio, it'll analyse that and give me some hopefully interesting information. So we can look at this and we can see how much of the UI thread was spent in what kind of activity. So there's a lot of yellow there, which is the app code. So whatever problems there are online, which is fair enough. And then we can see, you can dive into these. Where are the worst offenders? So where was most time spent? And go and sort of dive into that and go down to, well, actually, how does that break down? So if you're looking, if you're discovering particular issues, you can try and identify where that's happening. Similar thing with the energy consumption. I can rerun that. And we'll have a look at the estimated energy consumption, and you can tweak that and fine tune it and try and help out with that. So I just think some really interesting tools just to help on a different side of testing, if you like, about how these work.
Can you customize what device that things you're running on? To say, so obviously the power consumption will vary wildly depending on the processor and the device. If you're
I'm not sure actually. I don't believe so, but I'll have to check. I think it's just telling you here is how it's here against either your device or standardised one. I'm not sure what it's working on, but I'll happily check into that actually. Let me check. But I haven't seen an option to select a different type of device and see what that would be. So I think not, but let me double check actually. I'll have a chat with you afterwards. I'll let you know. So.
okay.
So that's some of that stuff. Right, so Git. So let's talk about this. So where do I want to start? So Visual Studio, the headline, Visual Studio 2013 supports Git. Okay? There's also Git support in 2012 if you get some of the later updates. So either a later version if you like of 2012 or out of the box in 2013. So why? So I guess why support Git when we've got Team Foundation Server, which has got its own, as well as other stuff, version control. I guess the thinking about this is probably, as some of this stuff. So and I won't go into this in great detail because of the timing, but Team Foundation Server really supports the more traditional client-server-ish model. It's evolved over the years, so you've got local workspaces that allow offline working, don't put file attributes in, but essentially you still you're working locally with your current version of the code, whatever you've checked out, and you then submit that back to the server, and you deal with any merges there. Things like branches take place on the server, that kind of thing. There are pros and cons, so this is not us moving to Git and throwing that away. Git has some inherent problems around truly massive projects. It doesn't scale that well, so you need to redesign those. The way its hashing mechanism works increases in time over large file directories and that kind of thing. Equally, if you have projects where you absolutely have a need to understand who has got what file checked out, high level of control, different securities on different branches and so on, then you do need that sort of more centralised model. So what we wanted to do though was to say, well, distributed version controls, which don't work like that, where you have the entire repository, including histories, branches, all of that stuff locally, and you choose when to share that. And there isn't really a concept of a server as such. There are remote repositories that you share with. There isn't really, there are patterns working. There isn't really a master copy as such. That's increasingly popular. So it's not, I would say it's still probably a minority sport, but it's an increasingly popular one. So we wanted to look at how to offer that. So do we do the usual Microsoft thing and just build our own, or do we look at Git, which is the leading tool? So there are others out there, things like Mercurial, Bazaar, there are some others, but Git is probably by far and away the leader in terms of market share, if you like. So let's take a look at Git as the leading one. Secondly, Git is very much becoming the standard for history interchange between not only distributed version control systems, but some others as well, like Subversion, for example. And it's a good way of transferring that data where you're not losing history, because it's all maintained in Git. You don't have to lose it in doing that. So it's interesting for interchange. It's also interesting because it's becoming a deployment protocol. Facebook use it, we use it in Microsoft Azure. It's a protocol, not the only one, but a protocol for deployment. How do I get stuff out into a particular environment? And it's got very good, strong cross-platform support. I put a question mark on Windows because arguably the weakest platform for Git is Windows. It came from Linux. It's got strong Mac and other platform support. It's completely supported on Windows, but it is probably arguably where there's the weakest support and where we might be able to help as well. So, what do we really mean by this? Well, if you look at Visual Studio, the way that we work with a version control system is through Team Explorer. It has a couple of layers. Essentially, it talks, in our case, to what's now been renamed the Team Foundation Version Control object model. So TFS, within that, you can now choose either Git or Team Foundation Version Control as the repository. That talks out to TFS. You've got a project. If it's Team Foundation Version Control, that's what you're using for version control, and it's integrated into agile planning, work tracking, bug tracking, builds, reports, all that kind of stuff. Alternatively, I should say we can access that from third parties like Eclipse and so on. Alternatively, if it's Git, we're still going to use Team Explorer, but instead we're plugging in effectively the Git layers. And what we've contributed a lot to is something called libgit2 and libgit2 sharp. So this is effectively the Windows implementation of how to access the Git commands and libraries. So we've taken that, contributed heavily to it, and not proprietarised it at all. This is contributed back to the open source project. And what that means is I can have another project in TFS, but this one is using Git for its repository, but it's still integrated into the agile planning and work items and build reporting and all that kind of stuff. So you're just choosing on a project-by-project basis which repository am I going to use. And as long as, all we're talking about here is Git, so any other tool or platform that can talk to Git can continue to talk to Git. So we're not locking that out in any way. And when I say Git, that doesn't mean it has to be in TFS either. So Visual Studio supports Git locally, so I've just got a local repository, nothing to do with TFS, and also if I've got remote repositories, which are nothing to do with TFS. So basically, it doesn't care, it just understands Git through the libgit library, basically. And one other thing to mention, very quickly, there's something called Git-TF, which we contributed before we had Git support directly. And that allows you to synchronize and migrate between Team Foundation Version Control and Git either way. So there is a mechanism for doing that if you want to or need to as well.
So you're saying that there is Git integration without a Team edition?
Yes, absolutely, yeah, completely. So let's show you some of that quickly. Let's go back in here. No, oops. Let's tidy things up a bit. Go with that. No, go around it fine. So what I'm going to do here, I'll show you in TFS, but the difference is, no, let's do that. Let's do this here. So I'll show you an on-premise TFS. I'm just going to say this is a Git project, but we'll come back to that point. Choose a process template, no difference here. Key difference is which version control mechanism do I want to use for this project. So it's not in this case, again, you don't have to use TFS, but in this case it's not a TFS choice, it's a for this project in TFS. It makes more sense for us to use Git perhaps. So I'll choose Git, we create a project, famous last words, but it shouldn't take very long. Okay, it should whiz along. And I'll very quickly take you through the process. So what we're doing there is, and I'll show you some other stuff in a second, but it basically prompts you through the way to work with this. So the first thing we need to do is clone the repository, and it's telling me it's going to be cloning it from this remote location, which in this case is in TFS, to this local workspace on my hard disk. So if I'm happy with that, I'll copy that, so I'll use it in a second, clone it, done, okay, we're done on that. So now I come in, I want to start to do some work, so let's have a console application spine. I stick in the path to that repository, because I want it to be inside that folder, and I can start working on it. So I'm going to pin this open, sorry, I'm really pushing space here, but let's just move that over. So already I've done, you can see I've done some hard work already, so I can start to commit this. So if I do my initial commit, I can commit this into my local repository. So I've now got my commit, so this is the SHA-1 hash, the abbreviated form of that, that's telling me that this is me, and this is what I just submitted into my local repo. So if I come in, and let's come in here and say, again, do some hard work. DevWeek, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's go back. Let's change it probably as well. Sorry, save it. So let's go back in, have a look at any changes. Lo and behold, I've got some more stuff in here, so I can say add hello message, commit that. Now, if I go and have a look at in here, just an easy way of seeing it, I've now got 2 commits locally, so I've got changes that are happening on my local repository. I don't need to have a remote one. If I go and have a look at the web access to this TFS project, if I go to the code part, it's showing me that for a Git project, this repository is empty. And that's because I'm choosing at the moment not to publish it up there. So this is entirely up to me in terms of the workflow. And in fact, whether I ever do is irrelevant as far as Git is concerned. So I can go through this process. When I am ready to do that, what can I do? Well, let's go to the unsync commit. If you're familiar with Git, sync isn't a command in Git. What we've done is we put it in as a utility command. What you typically do is something, a fetch, is go and get the latest version from the remote repository, but don't try and merge it in. A pull is a fetch with a merge, and then you need to do those before you push, so that you've got the latest version, you've sorted out any problems before you push back. So if you just do a pull and there are discrepancies, it will stop you. Sync wraps all that up, so it's a utility way, a wrapper for doing those, but you can do the individual actions if you want. So let's go and sync that. So now I've decided at this point in time to sync it with my remote server. So if I go back in here, now this stuff is sitting up in my remote server and I've published it. So we can then go and have a look at things like the history, I can see what those are, I can dive into it, there's all sorts of stuff I can do here, what are the differences between those versions, I can go and add in comments and do all sorts of stuff in here, view branches, explore it, but I've now got a remote copy and a local copy. If I go back to, so the next most obvious thing is probably, and what for a lot of people is the killer aspect of Git is branching. Because Git branching is very, very light. It's actually just a pointer to a new snapshot. So it's 40 bytes plus a new line. It's 41 bytes for every branch. So it's very, very lightweight and fast. So if I come in here and say, well, actually, let's go and create a new branch, and let's call it feature A or something, whatever I'm working on, and check it out. I'm now working in feature A. So if I come in here and say console, right line, hello from feature A. Save that, go into the changes, say add hello from feature A, commit that. I've created a new branch, made a change on it, committed that all locally, it's all done. So let's go back and change to master, and you'll notice that I can switch really, really easily between branches. And we've taken away all this page has changed, you want to reload it kind of stuff in Visual Studio for this, it understands the concept. So let's go back to my master branch, which is the default, and let's put in a clash. So let's say I've got console right line hello from master. Stick that in, save that, and let's go and commit that. So add hello from master. Commit it. So that's fine. So let's go back and in fact, if I go and let's go look at history, we can see that's what it looks like from a master perspective. If I go and have a look at the history in feature, we've got those different paths that are coming out of that. So what I might want to do here now is if I go back to the branches area, is merge these together. So I'll just take you quickly through that. So what I'm going to say is I want to merge. And I want to merge, let's do it the other way around, I want feature A branch to merge into the master branch, to merge them. Now it competed and it had conflicts, I know that because I put deliberately a conflict on the same line in there. So let's resolve that. I've only got one file. I could just dictate which one I'm going to take, but let's go and have a look at the merge tool. So I can select, actually I want that one, but I'm going to change it and say master. And you've got an editor in there and I can make whatever appropriate changes. And I'm happy with that, accept it, commit the merge, commit. If I want to, and if I'm ready, I can then push that up to the remote repo as well. But I can do all of that kind of stuff locally. I don't need to be connected, I can be on the train or whatever that is and work with it. If we go back in here, just refresh, come into things like branches. Sorry, I didn't publish the other branch, that's all. You can choose whether to publish branches, so we've only got the master branch up here. But I can go and see, here's my merge branch, etc. coming through, and I can go and have a look at more changes, all that kind of stuff. Now, just last sort of thing on this, important to know, let's just bump that up a little bit, is that this works. Again, you can choose, what we've done is add in, so it's full Git on the server side, or whether you choose DFS or not. The Visual Studio tooling is really the GUI tooling that is equivalent to the Git tooling. Any Git tools will work with that Git repository. So if I come in, let's change the font a bit so you can see it. If I come in here and say, where are we? So I'm going to use git bash. So let's go to source, cd repos, and I can't remember what we call that project, a git project, cd a git project, there we go. So that's where my console application is. So I can do git status, see what's going on. Now I'm going to be challenged if I go back to changes. I just want to show you that these kind of all synchronise in nicely, but I might be struggling to do that in space, but I'll show you hopefully. So let's clear that at the top. So if I do something like, let's just create a file, so let's say touch a file.txt. You won't see anything yet here. What I'm going to do is if I then do a git git add a file, I called it, didn't I? Okay. What you should see there is that we're picking up now a new file. So it doesn't matter where you're doing this, whether it's from the Git tools or the command line. If I do a git commit -m a new file. Okay, so I've got a new commit. That's disappeared from here. If I come in and have a look at the history, and I've got a new file. So what we're basically doing is we've covered quite a lot of the normal actions you can do inside the tooling. But if you're a Git power user or you want to do stuff that we don't support, you can drop out the command line. Git has out of the box has a kind of Git GUI that you can use. You can continue to use that, or you can use things like Git K and go and have a look at the branching structure of what's going on, or any other tool or script or whatever you do with Git, you can continue to use. So it's not proprietary or anything like that. And then very last thing is if I go back up here, we can just go and create new local Git repositories. That's as simple as if I hit the default a new repo, just hit create. That has just added a new Git repository. So if I go back in here, go up here, let's go up a level. We've now got new repo. So if I go into new repo and do a git status, there's not Git yet, but there's a new Git repository. Equally, if I go back up a level and let's make a new directory, which is even newer repo, cd new repo, I do git init, so I create it outside of Visual Studio. Then I can come back in here and I can just go and add in, there we go. I can just go and add it in, so I can add it in, find my even newer repo and just add that into Visual Studio. So let's add that in, and that's then available for me to work with as well, and then I can publish out or whatever. And if you can clone down from GitHub or whatever that needs to be, just need the URL, go and grab that, and instead of cloning from TFS, get it from GitHub or a bit like Git or wherever you want to use that. So, Git, that's Git. So loads more to that, but I guess the key message for me is it's just a choice. I think it's a very valid option, and you just need to think about, is Git appropriate for me? If that's the way we want to work, then great. So a few things I want to go through here around Team Foundation Server. Agile Portfolio Management. But I'm just going to talk about these because I want to show you one other demo, definitely. So I'll just talk about these and then demo something else. So Agile Portfolio Management is really support for epics and things above product backlog item. So that's been added into Team Foundation Server, and you can customize that and have up to 5 levels above product backlog item. So for example, the Scalable Agile Framework has something like it's like an investment theme breaking down into epics, down into features, down into product backlog items. So it has a few different levels, and you could customize it to reflect that. So this is basically where you've got things that are too big to deliver in a sprint, and they are concepts. So maybe adding in social integration, and you want Facebook authentication. That starts probably at a higher level and ultimately ends up in a sprint for a product or products. So you break that down. We've also got much better support for separate teams within a project in Team Foundation Server. So you can have multiple teams in a project. Each team then has their own task board, burn down, product backlog, all that kind of stuff. So, and then there's a master team that sits on top of that that can see all of that information. So you can structure your teams perhaps in a more natural way that reflects that sort of breakdown. We've introduced team rooms. Team rooms are a timeline of events that happen inside Team Foundation Server. You can choose which ones, but that's things like builds, code check-ins, code reviews, work item changes, and you can invite people into the team rooms as well, and there is a chat capability. So the way I look at this is in the same way that the history for source code really gives you some useful contextual information. This is the same thing but at a higher level. It's on a particular day, you can look at it by day or whatever. On a particular day, who was doing what bugs were being filed, what requirements were, product backlog items going in, who was working on it, what were they saying, all that kind of stuff. And you can give you that higher level context about this is what the team was thinking or these people were thinking. You can create your own team room, so maybe 2 of us are going to work on a particular bug, and actually we're going to be talking to each other and discussing how to fix it, what the problem is. That's going to be a bit too noisy in the general team room, so maybe we spin up a separate team room and work on that. So all sorts of capabilities in there. There is a plugin that extends it into Team Explorer, so you get notifications and all sorts of cool stuff like that. The value for that, I think, if you're all sitting around the same table, in the same room, there's probably some value later on in time, but I think there is some value there. But I think this really increases the more dispersed the team is, and the bigger the team, the more valuable that becomes. So if you've got people who work from home or different countries, offices, all that kind of thing, then I think there's some real value in just time zone separation is a good example, that you can pick up a thread of conversation and see that in the team room. Something else that's really neat is work item charting. So you can create, and this is literally in seconds, pie charts, stack bar charts, pivot tables from work item queries in TFS. And I think this is probably the direction that we're going with reporting in Team Foundation Server. So it's lightweight, it's really nice, and you can pin these to the web access page on Team Foundation Server. So a nice, lightweight, easy way to visualize what's going on, understand whatever it is you want to do in a query, who's got what work, how many bugs have we got, all that kind of thing, and then visualize it in different forms. So some nice stuff there. Now, I think the last thing just in this section I want to talk about is that we've added in support for testing in our web access tool. So Microsoft Test Manager gives you test case management and manual testing support. And not all, but a lot of that functionality is now available in the browser. So that means if you can't install Test Manager, maybe on a test device, you can just access TFS through the web browser and create and run and record results from manual tests using the web browser. So a neat addition to that. So be aware of that. So I was going to show that, but I'm running on behind, so I won't. So what I'd like to show you is release management. So let's talk about this. Brand new thing for 2013. So we acquired a product called InRelease from a company called InCycle. So not the whole company, but just that particular product. And it's been, I I think so far all we've done is rename it and put a different logo on it, so there will be more changes to come. But it's now called Visual Studio Release Management. So it is designed to be integrated with Team Foundation Server, but I will emphasise that that's optional. So what it will do is pick up a build, and as I say, out of the box it works really well with GFS, but you can point it anywhere. You can just point it to a directory and say get it from there. And it will take your whatever that build output is, and it will then deploy that through multiple environments. So you define those and you define the workflow, and I'll show you that very briefly in a second. But basically this is about, for me anyway, this is about the chucking it over the wall experience, from the development side. It's kind of, yeah, done some testing, all looks good to me, well, hey, there we go. And now it's over to other people do stuff, and at some point it gets released, And how do we actually participate in that? Two things that certainly really burned me in the past. One is any kind of manual deployment. Yes, we can get it to build in the development environment, to deploy it to the next environment. Here is, here's a manual that has X many steps in it. You need to do this, copy that over here. Don't forget to change this configuration file. Then do this, stand on one leg, blah, blah, blah. And that'll get there. I've spent many a time that for some reason deployments always happen on Friday. So Friday evening, working through that list, realising you've forgotten step 17 when you're on 53, all that kind of stuff. So there's the really tedious, human, error-prone side of releasing. And this also introduces the ability to have human workflow, so approvals and validations. That yes, we think this is ready to go, but somebody from QA needs to approve it before it appears in the test environments, for example. So let's give you a very quick demo of that, because I think it's a really nice addition. So let's go out of this guy, let's go back to this project. Let's get rid of that. So let's say, I'm going to have to do this super quick. So let's go in here, and on this machine, basically, move that away a bit, is we've got, slightly false, but it's the right intention, is we've got a dev, a QA, and a production environment. They're running on different pools. So dev is 8,000, QA is on 9,000, and production's on 10,000. So they've each got something on here. What I want to do is come in, let's just make a quick visible change, like changing that. So let's go in here, somewhere down here, there we go, let's change that. So let's make it, I could have used row essentials, etc. To do that. Let's say misspelled, or mistypo to DevWeek. Save that. Obviously, I go through all sorts of stuff, unit testing, attaching it to things, all that good stuff. What I'm going to do here is we're going to check it in. So I'll say I've changed the title, check it in. That's done, and then I think in this example I haven't set the build up to run automatically, so let's just go and kick off the build. So this might be a CI build, it's more likely to be a nightly build or something like that, but it's up to you. You can configure it. So what that build is now doing is now, it's going through the normal build stuff, so it's going to compile it, run the unit tests, all that kind of thing. Once it's complete, it's going to hand over to release management. So just while it's doing that, let's go and have a quick look at it. There's a release management client. You get this with premium, by the way, so in terms of additions. And what we've done in here, there's a whole load of stuff I haven't got time to show you, but basically there's a whole series of out-of-the-box tools. So things like how do I start, stop, deploy to Azure, IIS, SQL Server, all that kind of stuff. And anything that you can script or have scripted, you can add in as another tool. So a very common situation is that people already have scripted or partially scripted their deployment. You don't have to lose that effort. You can bring those in and wrap them up as a tool and add them in. What you're then doing is saying, well, actually, what I'm saying here is that for the development environment, let's automatically deploy. And in fact, once it's approved, oops, sorry, slightly off screen. Just scroll down slightly. Once it's screen resolution, sorry. So once it's approved by somebody, in this case Brian, then it can go to QA. QA goes through a similar automated cycle, but in production, we are absolutely not going to do this automatically. Someone will need to approve it and actually pick it off by hand, which is probably fairly normal. You can decide You can have as many environments as you like, you dictate that flow, and then within that, what we're saying is, when we say deploy, what we mean is follow this workflow. And you pick up the tools you've got, and then you drop these on and you say, what I mean is go and do this stuff. So in this case, go and get the old website, make a backup of it, go and deploy the new one. If there was a problem, we've got to roll back, go back to the old version, that kind of stuff. So this can be as complex, sophisticated as you like. And then repeat that across all the environments as appropriate. All that kind of stuff in there. So we're going to this. I can see I've got some traffic on here, which implies it's being deployed. Now I said that I think. So I'm going to connect as Brian. Trying to remember his password. There we go. Should be right. Yeah. So the flow here, and I'll just take you through one step of this, would be probably Brian would come in. He'd go and have a look at the development environment. And you go, okay, I can see it's got DevWeek 2014. I do all my tests, whatever verifications, fantastic, happy with that. What he would then do, he could use the thick client, or anyone can access the web client. I can come in, approve, reject, reassign. I can come in and say I approve that, so approved for QA. Approve that, and then that kicks it off down that workflow. When you get to things like the production release, you also get the option to say, I approve it, but it needs to be deferred, and then pick a date and time. So yes, you can deploy it, but it needs to be Saturday night, 3 o'clock in the morning or something. So do that kind of stuff. So I won't take you through the whole flow, but at this point, it's still not reached QA. That should happen once we get through those approval cycles, and we can move it after that. So this is all about just automating that post-build cycle, and that's new for 2013. And then the last thing, a couple of things actually. So Visual Studio Online. Let's go back to that. Let's first of all debunk it. I think it's probably a terrible name because what it isn't is Visual Studio Online. That's the one thing it's not. So what it is Team Foundation Server Online. So it's what was Team Foundation Services. To make it confusing, even more confusing, so part of this is you can get subscriptions now, and some of the levels of subscription to Visual Studio Online also give you Visual Studio. So things like Visual Studio Professional, for example, at a monthly subscription cost based on Visual Studio Online. But that is still not Visual Studio hosted in the cloud or something. So it's still a desktop version of Visual Studio that connects back to Visual Studio Online. If any of you have seen it, we do, I was going to briefly show it, I won't now because of the time, but we do have Monaco, which is an editor in the browser for Azure web projects, websites, which is really interesting and surprisingly sophisticated, but we are not, we are absolutely not at the stage of saying Visual Studio is an online tool, so that's not what this means. So it is Team Foundation Server available in the cloud. That means everything I've told you about Git is also true. So I could create a Visual Studio Online account, and that's fine. Good stuff about this is it's completely free to sign up. If you've got less than 5 users, there's no cost at all. If you go over 5 users, then that's where you need to pay for it in some form. If you've got MSDN, that covers it. Otherwise, you're into subscriptions, and there's some variations around that. But the thing I like about that is that means maybe you want TFS or an ALM solution, or maybe you even want a free Git repository that's private, so as opposed to GitHub that's got to be public, it's free. Then Visual Studio Online will give you that, and it's that remote one. You don't need to install it, configure it, update it, it's in the cloud, it's software as a service, and it gives you all the TFS stuff. There are a few differences. You authenticate using a Microsoft account, you can't customize the process templates, and there's no overlap reporting queue. Those are all on our backlog, so they are not yet rather than nevers. So we'll see those coming in, some sooner than others. And there are some other differences. So if you are really interested in Visual Studio Online, if you're thinking, should I go TFS on-premise or Visual Studio Online, get in touch and we can give you some other differences, help make sure you make the right decision. But it's a really good way to play around with it. You can just have your own personal account, have projects up there. You don't need to worry about backup and all that kind of stuff there. So I won't show you that because I just want to quickly cover off the last thing, which is application insights. So Application Insights is in preview, so it's not released. Don't know how much it's going to cost, all that kind of stuff, when it's coming out properly. But Application Insights is telemetry that gets added to your applications that gives you useful insight about who's been using them, depending on the application. That might be what browser types, what screen resolutions, user activity, but also things like availability, performance, and all that kind of stuff. So I think the really key thing to me, and I haven't got time to show you unfortunately, is just how easy it is to add in. What I will show you, there we go, already breaking my word there, is that if I come in and say, well, actually I wanted a new, let's have a new website. That's fine. You'll see here that we've got our Application Insights project. So if you've got the latest updates, you'll see that. What that's then doing, just change that to mine, is if I just select that on any project I choose, is that's it. It's one click, if you like. And once I click that, it stays clicked. So every project you create from new can have applications inside at the beginning. And all it does is inserts a little bit of code appropriate to the technology that's being used, which will then talk back to the Application Insights, which is hosted in Visual Studio Online. So it needs to be able to communicate with that. But having done that, you've then got access to, as I say, you can set up things like pings. If I go into, let's go in here quickly, network, let's go in here. You can, if I go to, let's go availability, and my, I'll do. What I've done here is I've set up a symbol ping. If I just edit that so you can see it in the background. And what I've said, get rid of that guy, is every 10 minutes, ping my application from these locations around the world, making use of the cloud, and just tell me if it's running. So just tell me. And if it doesn't, there's some rules down the bottom about email these people and do that kind of thing. So that's a really basic one. You can also have transactional tests using Visual Studio Web Performance tests, where you say every 5-10 minutes or whatever, go in and actually do the following. So maybe add something to the cart, or do something inside the application and tell me whether that works. So not just that the site is alive. And you can get all this information. So in this case, I'm seeing that on a particular date range, I can see how long it took particular pings to get through. If I look at things like usage, if I look at the environment, and let me just change the date range because I did some stuff on these. I'll get to where I want to go to. Okay, if I change that, you'll see something more interesting just as when I did this. But you'd see things like what OSs are people coming in on, what browsers, what screen resolutions, where in the world are they coming in. So I think this could help with feedback in terms of who's using my application and how should I perhaps think about tweaking it. People are using bigger screens, smaller screens. There's more people in this part of the world than I thought there were using a different browser or whatever than I was expecting. So that might perhaps change my behaviour or what I'm going to do for that. You can also pick up things like exceptions. You can add in your own custom events as well to record those relatively easily within this as well. So, and if you've already got an application, there's basically a little wizard to add it in. You just go, is this a server or not? I say no. What kind of thing is it? Let's say it's a website. There's enough information. Maybe yes, it is a server. Is it .NET or Java? Is it running in Azure or not? So let's say yes. Choose your options. It's a web service. There you go. Follow these instructions, and that will take you through to whether it's necessary, maybe no. Have a look at the instructions, and then there will be a series of instructions about how to set this up on your application. And typically, that's copy and paste this little bit of code that identifies you back to Applications Insight. And then if you want more, go and download the Microsoft Monitoring Agent, which will be able to report back on things like exceptions and performance and feed that back into these dashboards. So I think it's the appeal for me is having much better production time understanding of what's going on in your applications, who's using them and how to some extent, and being ahead of that curve, and it being really, really simple to set up, and that to me is the killer bit. Other things like this exist, but it's just that from within Visual Studio, it's just that one click, bam, you're done. it's set up without you thinking about it. You've got the basics in place, and then you can tweak it. So, that's me. I'm over time, for which I apologise. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to cover. So I hope that gives you a flavour for what's new in Visual Studio. I've tried to cover everything in, a bit of everything in the whole family of tools. I'm sure I would have not covered something in sufficient detail for some of you and changed some stuff you don't want to see from others. But I hope that gives you a flavour for that. I'm over time, so I won't go for questions now. If you've got any, I'll happy to stay here as long as you can resist not going to lunch. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that was useful. And any questions before or after, get in touch. I didn't do it up there, but Giles.Davies, Microsoft.com is on the first page. So please just ask questions or come and have a chat now. But thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you.